working with and through your complexes. Let me first state that I speak from my own personal experience, and everything that I state is my opinion based upon my experience. As an adult child of a narcissistic mother, throughout my entire life I have struggled with negative and distorted thoughts and feelings about myself. These negative ideas about myself and my performance in the world were projections from my narcissistic mother. As she was my primary caregiver and I was wholly dependent upon her, I internalized her projections as though they were objective truth. In time, I didn't need to have her present to rain on my parade. I would do it to myself. The media doesn't help much. With television, film, and numerous examples of a false reality most people buy into, to one extent or another. Like the iconic Barbie doll and its unrealistic, virtually unobtainable body shape, TV shows fill impressionable heads with idealistic notions of how the world works and how we need to be and who we need to be popular and get ahead in life. This fear of falling short causes us to create a false self that we present to the world. God forbid that anyone out us for being the loser we believe ourselves to be, thanks to narcissistic mom. The problem is, even when people aren't paying enough attention to us to bother to see through our false persona, we know that it's false, and we know deep down inside that we're frauds. With so many reasons to feel bad about ourselves, in time, it becomes our normal. This sense of being a fraud made it hard for me to accept a compliment. When people would praise my musical skills, it would trigger my feelings of being a fraud, because there was so much I didn't know how to do, as if that mattered at all to the person paying the compliment. An inferiority complex is like having a YouTube troll inside your head 24/7. Now, as far as the false persona goes, the narcissist is the supreme example. The difference for us is that we yearn for authenticity. When the narcissist presents themselves as being something they're not, they can be quite charming. When we present ourselves as something we're not, it's creepy. And we know it's creepy. We can feel it. But what are we supposed to do? This is how we were raised. This is what we had to do to get through our childhoods. Our parents were supposed to equip us for the world outside. At least that's the conventional wisdom. I came to a point in my mid-30s where I realized everything I thought I knew was wrong. I had to take myself apart and put myself back together again more than once. That was a pretty harrowing process, but whatever wisdom I'm able to convey to you was gained that way. At the job I had prior to my present one, my supervisor observed that I was a perfectionist and I wanted to be able to do everything right from the get-go. Now, I would assume that everyone wants to be successful at what they do and that no one likes to make mistakes. But when you have an inferiority complex fueled by internalized toxic shame, people might think you're stupid. People might laugh at you. There's nothing more horrifying than the prospect of people laughing at you. Now, a healthy person doesn't give a flying rat's ass if some jerk thinks you're stupid or laughs at you because you messed up. You don't feed the trolls. But when my inferiority complex gets triggered, a dark cloud comes over me, and the chemical soup inside of us that controls our emotions, that control us, screams that for my very survival, I have to prove that I am not stupid and not a loser, and so on. Even though I know what's happening whenever I'm triggered, I'm powerless to circumvent the process. I am taken on an unpleasant roller coaster ride through feelings of anger, humiliation, and shame, often over fairly inconsequential things, and end up having to talk my way out of the dark cloud with someone supportive. of whom I am blessed to have many. Allow me to state and restate again how unnecessarily difficult life has been having to deal with the burden of the inferiority complex. This is a horrible, ugly, distorted prism to see the world and yourself through. Like looking through a kaleidoscope when what you need is a pair of binoculars. It's hard to see how others see you when you can't even see yourself as you are, when your default position is your narcissistic mother's. Let me share with you a recent example of this process. I work with a bunch of millennials and they don't really talk to me. Now, when I was 20, where I worked then, we all talked with anyone. It didn't matter whether they were also 20, 60, or anywhere in between. But times are different now. People are different, and this was hard to get used to and made work very lonely and often very depressing for me. And bear in mind, I am viewing this reality through the skewed lens of the inferiority complex. My coworkers didn't like me. I'm isolated, lonely, and I'm different from everybody else. I eventually made Employee of the Month, but soon reached the conclusion that the only reason why I won was because my coworkers were always hanging out together and leaving me to do all the work. Not that this didn't happen sometimes, because it did, but the upshot was that I convinced myself that the only reason I made Employee of the Month was because my coworkers didn't like me. And that sort of irrational thinking is the inferiority complex in action. No matter how well I did, no matter what I achieved, Mom had to put a damper on it. And even with her long out of my life, her bad programming was still playing in my head. And here I was, now doing it to myself. And one of the worst things about the inferiority complex is the shame around having the complex in the first place. You know the feelings are irrational, but they feel so valid. That black cloud hanging over your head looks and feels so real. Another painful thing about any complex is the illusion that you're all alone, that you're the only one going through this and no one else could possibly ever relate. You worry that people might think you're crazy. And this is simply more bad programming, deep-seated and primal, for the simple reason that narcissistic mother couldn't relate. And there was a time when she was the whole world. And if someone thinks you're crazy, they're ignorant and an asshole. More people need to understand what a traumatized person looks like. But I've found that many people are decent human beings and will lend an ear when I ask them if I can vent. For me, the only way through a complex is to talk, a fresh and objective take on things to put them back in perspective. Now, getting back to my story, I was talking to one of my millennial coworkers. We were having a beer after work, and I was seeing how completely full of shit and in denial he was about the reality of his life. Then he said something that really struck me. He said, "I'm going to be truthful with you. People aren't going to care about what you're going through." And this broke the spell, because caring about others was a difference between myself and the millennials in question. And caring about others was why I made Employee of the Month and they haven't. And I suddenly felt so much better about myself. I no longer needed or wanted their approval. Of course, I also told myself that I was free to transfer to another department, which was a mental trick to help me to detach from the situation. But I realized right away that that wasn't necessary. I was okay with the status quo. I also saw that this particular millennial was very, very limited in his function and his scope, and that he was actually doing the best he can. It's hard to stay angry at someone who's doing the best he can. Everything has its proper context. So the upshot is that after processing the reasons around this breakdown, I experienced the breakthrough of finding it easier to be myself at work and being more open to others, and finding them being more open to me. The frustrating thing about the inferiority complex is that it's something in your head, but it isn't you. Once you realize what's happening when you're triggered, you can take the steps needed to work through the process of resolving that situation as quickly as possible. Because each and every time you find yourself triggered, it's an opportunity for healing. It's not easy, but when you do your best to approach the situation consciously, you can make slow and steady progress towards your own recovery. I am blessed to have a great support system with my loving spouse and a bunch of great coworkers, well, the ones who aren't millennials, who give me a lot of appreciation and support. Cultivate those people in your life, the ones who are there for you, who see you not through the limited filter of your narcissistic parent, but as the amazing person you truly are. This is After Arts, out.